Back again, Ozonics Killerwinds podcast. I'm Cole Tanner.
I'm Nick Simon.
Episode number 8.
Ocho.
5 plus 3.
5 plus 3
We're
equals
just
8.
We're
9
just
minus
stacking.
1 is
We're just
8.
stacking these up.
I know, we're really rolling.
Yeah, I mean,
It's pretty fun.
I feel like
it's borderline an addiction.
Here's
That's all I
the thing.
think about.
yeah, it's not all that I think about, but I do feel like we're getting a little bit of a groove where, so logistically, for whoever may be watching or listening, we're basically just trying to shoot a podcast a week.
Yep.
You know, we've got a lot going on, so we're just like one podcast a week. You know, it takes depending on what hour and a half to do it.
Yeah.
And then it seems like it doesn't take you much, if that much time to
It's super
rip
easy.
through it.
Yeah.
From a producing perspective, and there we go. So we're trying to do one a week.
Yep.
We did a couple more right at first off the bat.
Yeah, just to
Get some under our belt.
Yeah.
But man, now I feel like we're ripping right along.
Yeah, and like everything is so much easier now. Like set up, like we kind of just know exactly what to do.
Yep.
Which is really good from a time standpoint, because like we can literally just on a whim be like, let's just shoot one quick.
Yeah, let's do a podcast.
Yeah.
Hey, I've got time this morning, or hey, let's do one tomorrow afternoon.
Yeah.
Yep. We can just fit it in.
Yeah. It's pretty awesome actually. I'm glad that we're doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's working out good. So today we're talking about overlooked spots.
Yep.
I think for Nick and I, we're right in the middle of, kind of like, I guess I would call it like summer scouting.
Yeah.
It's the time of year where, especially for me, I'm always trying to find an excuse to just do something.
Yeah.
I mean, even this weekend, I'm going to be tearing some stands down, moving some cams around. I'm just always trying to find an excuse to be out.
Yeah.
But it's tough because I want to find an excuse to be out, but I have a tendency, if I'm not careful, I put additional pressure on spots that I don't need to. It's hard for me to stay out of there.
Yeah.
And so I think the nice thing about what we did this week, we just took a couple lunch breaks on a couple of different days. And there's a few spots that I've looked at for years that you're trying to find a couple places to try to put some spots and get into.
Yeah.
And so actually the first spot that we went to is a spot that I looked at, years and years ago.
Yeah.
And I actually looked at it for turkey hunting.
Yeah.
Same thing. It was in the springtime. And I looked at it on a Google map.
Yeah.
And I was looking at it. I'm like, there looks like that's a nice tree line. Like, looks like there's got to be a ridge right there. And it was up against a marsh. And I'm like, man, you'd think there's got to be turkeys back in there.
Yeah.
So one day before turkey season, I just marched out there really early in the morning and got out there. And all of a sudden I'm sitting here going, wow, I need to completely switch gears here. I shouldn't be thinking about turkeys. I should be thinking about deer. Yeah. This looks incredible. And again, that's kind of always just kind of been in my back pocket. And then as you're kind of trying to figure out like, where do I go? What do I do? I'm like, well, heck, this is kind of a sleeper spot. It definitely gets overlooked. Like when I was in there years ago, there was, you could tell there hadn't been anybody in here. There wasn't any tree stands. You didn't see where it looked like somebody had been hunting. Yeah. The whole idea is you kind of get in there and get out of there and you leave no trace, but you still can, as a bow hunter, you can kind of go, that's where I would be. Yeah. And there wasn't anything there.
Yeah.
And so we kind of went through the process of what I always do when I'm looking for those types of overlooked spots. And so the first thing we did is I pulled it up on Google Maps.
Yep.
The other thing that, Google Maps is awesome because it's obviously just great satellite imagery. Yep. The other thing that I have used a lot these last couple of years is if you go to the Iowa DNR website, it's called the Iowa Hunting Atlas or Iowa Hunting Maps or something like that. We're going to show it here in a little bit. Yeah. But I'll tell you what, the state of Iowa has done a heck of a good job where you can get right on there. It's a free tool and it shows aerial photos. I actually like to bounce between Google Maps and the Iowa Hunting Atlas and also Onyx as well. Yeah. Sometimes, again, because you never know what time of year the pictures might be taken. For example, we'll show like the spot that we're looking at, the Iowa DNR maps were a lot greener. Yeah. Looked like it was in the early summer. The Hunting Atlas map or the Google images looked like they were a little bit earlier in spring. The field was still brown, but either it was late. It was either early fall or really early spring. Yeah. So sometimes images are darker. Maybe there's a cloud in the way. You never know. Yeah. So it's kind of nice to kind of bounce between two images. So I like to first start off a lot with those just like satellite imagery. Yeah. It's such a great tool now with how accessible that all is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny to think about 10, 15 years ago, we just didn't have that.
Yeah.
Like at all. Like you just didn't have such that right at your fingertips.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember when I used to have to go on like a computer and I would print them off.
Yeah.
And then I would take them out there and I would like hold it and look at them like, okay, I'm right here.
Yeah.
And that's how I did it.
Yeah.
I mean, using, I'd be going to Staples buying ink all the time because I would be running out trying to make colored images. But so that's a good place to start. And that's what we did with this spot. But I think the really, really interesting thing that I have used the last couple of years is Lidar maps.
Yep.
And honestly, I never knew what Lidar maps were. And actually, the really cool thing is the Iowa DNR website. You can put multiple layers on the maps, and they have a Lidar option on there. And basically, the redneck way of explaining Lidar maps is it's almost like X-ray vision.
Yeah.
Basically, it's taking images of the Earth as if the Earth was just scorched.
Yeah.
Void of all vegetation. It just shows the contour.
Yeah.
I mean, to the point that you can even see, if you go over like neighborhoods, you can see like the foundations of the houses. It's pretty incredible. Or if they have just a big dip in their backyard, you can see the dip.
Yeah.
And it's really, really cool. So it's like a topography map on steroids.
Yeah, definitely.
That shows the contour of the Earth, and it really is what it looks like.
Yeah, and it's really crazy to look at the difference between a topography map and this Lidar. It's almost like the topography map is like showing something completely different.
Yes.
Like it's crazy how like in depth and how precise these Lidar maps are, and it's super cool to look at. I never knew about them until really this week.
Yeah,
and I've been looking at them everywhere.
Well, yeah,
just because it's super interesting.
Oh yeah, and I think the thing too is like when you look at topography maps, there's different scale topography maps.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at a very detailed or a scaled in topography map, sometimes those topography maps have unbelievable detail, and you really can see every little kind of nook and cranny.
Yeah,
but still, I don't know what it is. If it's just the Lidar maps just feel more tangible.
Oh, 100%.
It feels more just like real, like you're just really looking at exactly what it looks like. Not like, oh, this is the estimated topography. This is really what it is.
Yeah.
So to give a little bit of background, and if you want to pull up that computer while I'm kind of explaining this, would you like snap your neck there? He turned really fast, and I think he almost like tried to break a vertebrae there. But okay, so I'll kind of explain a little bit, and I'm just going to be reading this because I really want to make sure I say this the right way. Lidar maps stands for light detection and ranging. So the whole idea is that it uses light in the form of a pulsed laser to measure range or the variable distance to the Earth. So these light pulses combined with the data recorded by like an airplane or a helicopter generates a precise 3D map and that has the information of the shape of the Earth and the surface characteristics. So basically it consists of a laser, a scanner, and a specialized GPS.
Yeah.
So, and basically brings all this together to generate these maps.
Yeah.
So the whole idea is that if there's an airplane flying over, and you were talking about it almost like a fish finder, right?
Yeah.
If you imagine the airplane, the table is the ground, airplane flies over. So basically what it has is these lasers that they call it a pulse and a return.
Yep.
But it's not only pulsing straight down, it's pulsing out to the side.
Yeah.
So it pulses, the laser pulses out, and then it comes back on the return.
Yeah.
And then there's a scanner inside the airborne object, whether it's an airplane or helicopter.
Yep.
And then that scanner brings in that information. Then they also use GPS to locate where they are. And the GPS and the instruments in the airplane also help decide if the helicopter is tilting or the airplane's turning, right? Because if all of a sudden the airplane turns and if the laser's here and it goes off to the side, but then the airplane banks to the right, all of a sudden now it's a different distance, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So it uses all this technology to, populate that to make sure that it's accurate.
Yeah.
And then it creates this contour and shape of the Earth.
Yeah.
And like you said, a measured range or a variable distance from that helicopter airplane. Yeah. So it's pretty cool. Moral of the story is that, I mean, it's really incredible how you can just really see the contour of the Earth. Yeah. And I think it was kind of neat when we went to the Iowa hunting website, and I'll show that right now. and we're going to do a screen record of this. So
It
as
is
we're
currently recording.
okay, so I'll do the best I can to describe this if you can't see what we're doing. But this is the eye we do on our website, and it's really easy to find these maps. Just so everybody knows, if you go to the eye we do on our website, you go to hunting, and then you just go right down there, 3 down. It's called Interactive Hunting Atlas.
Yep.
I'm telling you, man, it's a really powerful tool. I've honestly gotten to the point now where I use that as much as Onyx.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know? So, for example, this right here.
We should probably say, too, we're not experts on this.
Right.
So if people are watching this and like we're completely wrong, throw it in the comments. I mean, we're still learning, too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Believe me. I know that listen, it's not if we're wrong. I know I'm wrong.
Yeah. There's going to be stuff on here that people are probably going to be like,
Yeah. To get back to what you just said there. Yeah. The disclaimer is we're not experts. Like I said, describing what LiDAR is, somebody might read that, but listen to that and be like, oh, well, actually, it's, you know what? This is my Google searching definitions that I found on the internet, right? Basically, it's a laser that pulses out, comes back. There's a scanner and a GPS that coordinate to figure out the contour of the Earth. There's probably a lot more to it. We're trying to simplify it for the sake of our discussion.
Definitely.
And this is just our kind of redneck hillbilly way of doing it. You know what I mean? Like, doesn't mean we have it all figured out. But so what we've got on the screen here, this is the hunting atlas imagery from the Eyewood on our website. And this is the piece that we went and scouted. So the interesting thing is not only we talk about finding overlooked spots, this spot is a great example of sometimes you have spots that are just really small spots that, you know, guys go, oh, it's just too small.
Yeah.
There's no deer there. This is an example kind of the opposite where it's a big spot and you're trying to find a small piece within that big spot.
Yep.
And this is a great example. If you were to, you know, if you had this whole big marsh on a map and you had different colors that you were going to color in for the different animals that are there, a lot of this would be waterfowl.
Yeah.
There'd be a good section that you would color for pheasants, a really small section for deer.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is I'd rather have a really good small section than a bigger bad section.
Yeah, definitely.
And this is a great example of a really good small section. The thing that interests me when I first looked at it from the Google images and the satellite photos is if you look here, you can see there's a thicket right here, a big thicket that looks like it's got to be on some sort of high spot if there's brush like there is there, but there's marsh all around it. And then right at the corner of this private public, this is what I saw originally. I was like, well, look at that little thicket of trees. That looks good. You've got bedding over here. You've got feeding over here. You've got this hardwood tree line right along here. This looks like this would be the perfect transition zone where deer are going to be coming through there. If I've got a northwest wind that's blowing this way, I'll have the wind in my face. Even if I get a south wind, if it's a straight south wind, by the time that deer comes across and cuts across me with those onyx above my head, it's going to give me enough that I'm going to be able to get away with it.
Yeah.
So it just kind of felt like the perfect little spot. But again, the thing about the Google images is that only kind of tells you a little bit of the story. I can't really see the contour, right? Is this a big hill? You know, obviously this is really, really low because it's a marsh, but what is all this doing? What is it telling me? And that's where these LiDAR maps are so huge. So I'll pull this up here. So when you want to look at the LiDAR maps, you can go on the right-hand side of the maps. There's these little drop-down menus, and you see this looks like a layer. I click on that, and I scroll all the way to the bottom, and right there, LiDAR. Now watch this. Bam.
Boom.
Just like that.
Bang.
Now, we talked about this must be a high spot. Well, it obviously is. Look at that.
Yep.
There's a high spot right there, and look at how this just, you can see where it's just like it's like a little funnel path that goes over to this, and that's obviously a really big high spot. That field's a big high spot. And then this just kind of ridges around and keeps going back along that marsh. You know what I mean? And that thicket of trees is right here off this little point.
Yeah.
So it was just a really, really, I think these LiDAR maps, and again, you can even see out here, here's more high spot. You know what I'm saying? Like, and those deer know how to find those high spots.
Oh, yeah.
If you're looking at a marsh, these LiDAR maps can be an invaluable tool just to be able to really see where you think those deer might be bedding.
And we'll put the drone footage up here too.
Absolutely.
And like the drone footage and what we were seeing here matched up perfectly.
Yes.
Like right where this high spot is and then that little funnel or whatever.
Yep.
The trails that were going back and forth from that were unbelievable.
Yeah. It looked like there was cows in there.
Yeah, it was actually really insane. And so it just goes to show that like this little tool that we have here, just it kind of really solidified what was going on and what we were actually seeing too. So it was cool to, get that confirmation from both.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is a great point. So then we really zoomed in on the Google images. I'll go back to this just so you can see it. So I can take the layer back off if I want of the LiDAR maps pretty easily. Boom, there we are again. But then we're talking about earlier about how sometimes the images are darker. So this is the Iowa DNR site. But then if I go to the Google image of it, it just looks a little different.
Yeah.
You can kind of see it from a different perspective. All this is brown. So that's obviously must be early springtime.
Yeah.
Earlier than the other one.
Yep.
But yeah, and again, I can zoom in on this
and you can
and literally look at that. You can see the trails.
Yeah.
Look at that. I mean, that's just incredible. Like those are just deer trails walking into that thicket. But then the interesting thing is we are fortunate we have a drone.
Yeah.
So we put that drone up and you get that drone above and then you can really
in real time,
not just in theory on a satellite image that's from who knows when.
Yeah.
I'm looking at it right now and there's the deer trails that I can go and literally step on.
Yeah.
So that was really, really cool as well. The other thing I would say that another tool that I've started to use, and it wasn't quite as valuable in this scenario, but it also just gives you another option for LiDAR maps, is this website called CalTopo. It's free. They have a paid version that you can use too. This is just a free version that you can just jump on their website.
We'll put the link in the bio.
Yep, just caltopo.com. It's pretty easy. And the cool thing about this is this isn't just the state of Iowa.
Yeah.
This is the entire country.
Yeah.
Like I was just like zooming around and I was like, oh, let's look at Europe. And I was zooming up just to see let's just see what I can do here.
Yeah.
And it was pretty incredible. So CalTopo is another option and we'll get back to that here in a little bit. But the thing that I would say is, like you said, when it comes to these overlooked spots, to kind of wrap this all up, or just to kind of button this section of it up, don't be afraid to use satellite images.
Yeah.
That's what I do. Whether it's Google Maps, whether it's the Iowa DNR hunting atlas maps, use Onyx.
Yep.
But then at a certain point, you just can't beat getting boots on the ground.
Yeah, and
if you have the time to get out there, get out there.
Especially with these overlooked spots, because these overlooked spots are 9 times out of 10 going to be pretty small.
Yep.
So it'll take you an hour to go put boots on the ground, do a little speed scout session.
Yep.
And you're going to know pretty much everything about the spot.
Yeah,
I think that's the one thing that you need to realize. It doesn't take that long.
Yeah, we literally just ripped out there.
Yeah.
And we just rallied along that fence line.
Yep.
And then we got down here into this corner.
Yeah.
And that's where we really got excited, because we're looking to the west and going, okay, that thicket's way bigger than it looks on the satellite images.
Yeah.
It looks way bigger than it did on the drone.
Yeah.
And then we're looking at this going, well, this is where the deer are going to walk.
Yeah.
And then we're looking at this thicket of pine trees out in front of us.
Yeah.
Like, gosh, that looks good.
And we walk into that thicket of pine trees.
And it was, you were saying this earlier that, kind of the fun thing for me when Nick and I sometimes do this is I just get to kind of like walk along, and Nick's got a backpack and cameras and he's got stuff hanging off everywhere. And like you said, sometimes it's hard to describe it on video, because how do you show a trail, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, there's grass.
Yeah.
But that was undeniable.
Yeah,
it was just dirt paths.
A lot of times when you're doing these, I call them daily blogs, just like showcasing what you're doing, what you're finding. A lot of times, like you see a trail, and you're like, oh my gosh, that's beaten down. And then you film it, and then you go back and look at it, and you're like, that don't even look like a trail, it just looks like a bunch of weeds.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this case was way different. There was, right in the middle of this thicket, there was there was just a ton of trails coming together, and it's good when you can go back and look at the footage and you can clearly see it. And it was like, this wasn't just like one trail, it was like 3 feet wide, and you can tell that it's just getting beat down.
Well, you can see it right there, right? There's the thicket, there's the trails. They're just coming in and out of there like crazy. Yeah. Well, yeah, and it was just like I think we're going to name this spot the 4-way stop.
Yeah.
Because there was like 4 different trails like converging on that little thicket of pine trees.
Yeah.
That were just kind of there for no reason. There wasn't any other pine trees. At some point, there was somebody that was like, you know what? I want some pine trees here. You know, and they dropped something because there was like 4 or 5 of them for no apparent reason. There was no other pine trees around.
Yeah.
But the cool thing about this spot too is then we were, we went from the aerial photos to the Lidar maps to the kind of like this little speed scouting trip where we got the drone up in the air, we're putting boots on the ground. But then all of a sudden you could tell we kind of switched gears to, okay, now where will we put a stand?
Yep.
And, you kind of, like I was saying yesterday, the sign doesn't lie.
Yeah, exactly.
If there's sign there, there's sign there.
Yeah.
If there's sign there now, and that sign was from the fall, there's going to be deer there.
Yeah.
And so then it was like, okay, well, where would we put a stand?
Yeah.
And at first, I think we were kind of a little predicament because we thought I thought initially like, gosh, that pine tree thicket's perfect.
Yeah.
But it was actually super thick.
Yeah, it was too thick. Almost.
Yes, too thick. And in the state of Iowa, this is public land, and you can't cut, so that's always a real trick. It's like, well, if I could cut, I'd cut a lane here and here and here. We'd be golden, but you can't do that.
Yeah.
And so we were trying to finagle, like, okay, well, how do we do that? Well, we ended up figuring that the best place to sit on this would actually be just to the east of the thicket.
Yeah.
We found a nice couple of trees actually set back kind of right up against the marsh.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I think
it's definitely sorry.
No, you're good. I think you just kind of, I would do this. I would push this way and get it like that. There you go.
Okay, gotcha.
So you're not too far back.
Yeah, I was just trying to see
No, you're good.
Your screen. No, the spot that we ended up picking out is like, it's really perfect. I mean, the tree isn't, I wouldn't say it's ideal. I mean, we'll be able to make it work, but if we were in that thicket, you pretty much only had one shot, and it was out to the north side of it. But once you get down here, you can get them coming out of the thicket. You can get them if they're going around it. It just opens up the door to so many options for actually hunting because, that's what we're in there to do is to hunt them. I mean, you could go set up in that thicket and see a ton of deer probably, or in the pine tree thicket and see a ton of deer, but they would have to do one thing only to get a shot.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so the spot that we've ended up picking I think it's pretty dialed.
Yeah, I do too. I like I said, yeah. And again, it's not like it's not going to be an 80-yard shot.
No.
I mean, the big trail coming out, I think it would be at like just not over like 20 yards.
Yep.
So it would be a pretty good shot. And if they did step out a bit farther, you could still, there was plenty of space.
Oh yeah.
The nice thing too about that, and you can see it on the video, and we talk about this in the other spot we scouted as well, is like sometimes what you end up doing is it's hard to find. You can find a right tree, but it's just a straight tree and that's it.
Yeah.
And what I inherently do is, I ended up going higher. I just think if I can get out of their line of sight, if I can go higher in a tree like that, sometimes that's good. Sometimes it's bad because you can just get so silhouetted up there.
Yeah.
The nice thing about the tree that we did find is there was a Y.
Yeah.
And man, I love to get in like near a Y of a tree or the canopy of a tree just because I try to leave as much of it as I can. I was always taught that deer have a hard time with depth.
Yeah.
Right. So if you can create more depth for yourself in a tree where there's a Y right there, or you can make yourself where you just kind of get right in the middle of the Y that you look like you're just another part of the tree, I think that really helps you.
Yeah.
And so I think that's going to be a really dino piece of that is it's in the Y of a tree. We can make it work for a double.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think it's going to be pretty killer.
Yeah, that Y is going to help a lot with the double setup.
Yeah.
Just having that cover there, that will be there early season and late season too.
Yep.
It'll be huge.
So, so then to kind of transition from this was a great example of a, and I can put this down and we'll bring it back up when we talk about Lidar again. Okay. But, that was a great example of a big spot trying to find a small piece, right, of it. But the other spot that we scouted was a small spot.
Yeah.
It was just small altogether.
Yeah.
And it was funny, the kind of the history of that spot as well, as I turkey hunted it.
Yep.
And when I started to turkey hunt that spot in the spring, all of a sudden I was just having tons of deer just rip across this little field between this big thicket and this little creek tree line. I'm like, and same thing as this spot. I'm like, geez, oh Pete, I need to start thinking about deer hunting this. I'm like, this is crazy. And so again, this time of year, I went out there and I looked through it and I didn't find any tree stands.
Yeah.
This is a permission piece. So I was like, I thought for sure there'd be stuff out there. I walked to the north, the other part of it that looks, and that's meant for deer as well. There was tree stands. Okay, guys are in here. You know what I mean? But there wasn't anything on that creek and it just got overlooked. And I'm like, golly.
Yeah.
So then we were out there this spring, turkey hunting with Bobo a couple times. We took Jet out there a couple times. We've got video of this little thicket with the creek is right behind it and the tree line's right there. And there's just deer just kind of appearing out of it.
Yeah.
Saw a couple different bucks just kind of stroll through, checking out the blind, trying to figure out what's going on. So we did the same exact thing. We went through the Google images. On the Google images, you can see the deer trails coming across that cornfield in the same spots I was seeing them in the spring. We put the drone up in the air. Same thing, doing a little speed scouting. Put the drone up. You can clearly see the deer trails just coming across the field.
Yeah, like plain as day.
Oh, yeah. Like the corn is only 2-3 inches high.
Yeah.
And boom, there's the deer trails. I mean, it's just crazy.
Yeah.
So we got down there and we scouted that thicket, and that is definitely a spot that we are going to hunt for sure.
Yeah, it's really awesome in there.
Yeah.
It was honestly a lot better than I thought it was going to be. A lot of times, sometimes I feel like you can see those thickets and it can be kind of hit or miss.
Yep.
And it was really awesome.
And that was an example too, where the Lidar map in that regard didn't come in quite as handy.
Yeah.
Because it was very obvious what the terrain was doing.
Yeah.
And it's not like they were going to use that terrain in such a way. And I would say that would be the one thing I would say also with the Lidar maps is it reiterated the fact that deer will find the path of least resistance.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, and you could tell that there was that on the first spot, there was the thicket. And then there was that small strip that they were going to walk down to get over into this other section.
Yeah.
The funny thing is the path of least resistance on the second spot, we got up against the thicket and up against the tree line.
Yeah.
We're kind of walking, I called it Deer Avenue.
Yeah.
There was this kind of like 8, 9, 10 foot wide strip where the thicket kind of stopped. It was kind of tall grass. And then there was the hardwoods.
Yeah.
There was a very pronounced deer trail.
Yeah.
As we walked to the south, all of a sudden we came to a down tree.
Yeah.
And I got to here and was like, crap. You know, like they're not going to go through that.
Yeah.
I kind of just started to look and they had already started to work around it.
Yeah.
You know, and that is such a thing that deer will find a way.
Yeah.
My buddy Chris, actually, a couple years ago, you know, you kind of feel like you don't ever want to be the guy that's like, you never want to fall into the thing of like, you can't teach an old dog new tricks.
Yeah.
We were on a permission piece that I was allowed to hunt on. And we were out there doing some summer scouting and there was 4 or 5 trails that came kind of around this corner. And I told Chris when he came with me, I was like, gosh, this is just like, there's just so many places they can come from.
Yeah.
I'm like, I just don't know. And he's like, well, it was kind of funny because he was like, well, let's just make them go one way.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what? And he's like, let's just block them. It's like, what a great idea.
Yeah.
And that's what we did. We were cutting lanes. So instead of just kind of like stacking the brush and randomly, we literally, there was trees along those trails. We just blocked them.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, dude, that fall, they sometime during that summer, they came up like, well, can't go this way anymore.
Yeah.
And they just instinctively all just drop down this over here and come right around that corner. And that's right where they came.
Yeah.
I shot 2 or 3 does out of that spot that literally they came and they walked down the exact trail I wanted to just because we blocked it.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it wasn't like this huge big dam of a brush pile, but you just needed enough that they can't get through, you know?
Yeah. I have a very similar story where the best spot on our farm is in the corner of the property.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, there's a tree that's like perfectly right in the corner. Obviously I don't have any shooting lanes on the neighbors. I'm not going to shoot onto their stuff.
Yep.
But there was multiple times where deer would cross over on the neighbors, but like right to my right. And I just couldn't get them to come onto ours. Well, that summer, the neighbor cut down a ton of trees and he doesn't hunt. And he stuffed them right in that corner. And I'm like, oh my God, this could be perfect.
Yeah.
And sure enough, now all they do is cut the corner on our side.
Isn't that funny?
It's awesome. But I didn't hunt there last year, but they cleared everything out completely. So it's going to be totally different. I'm really curious to hunt it this year and see what it's like. But yeah, I mean, it's like you said, I mean, anything to kind of divert them a little bit, they will, and they'll take the easiest way.
Yeah. It's funny that I have a bad story about that. I was hunting on a spot that I had permission here, but I didn't have permission here.
Yeah.
And there was another guy that was hunting this spot, and the deer would bed over here and they would walk onto me. And that's just the way it was. They walked from the west and they walked to the east.
Yep.
And then they would turn this corner, and then they would, this little pinch point that I was in, and then they would go to the south. And I always usually hunted that early because I had some doe tags, and I would love to try to go in there, and I could just know that they were going to kind of come around that corner, you know?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden that fall, they weren't coming around the corner. And I'm like, what? I'm like, what changed? I'm like, this is weird. And I hunted out there like 2 or 3 times. And I was like, and they just weren't. It was like I'd hunted there year after year after year, and they would come around that corner.
Yeah.
And they just weren't coming around the corner. And they were going more like this way. And I'm like, why are you doing that? And I mean, I was like, I guess I can just move. But I'm like, finally the one day, I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to sneak down there, and I'm going to get down to the fence and just see like what's different.
Yeah.
Well, what the guy did is same thing. Dude, so he didn't want the brush on his side. So he piled up brush on them. There was like 2 big main trails. He piled up brush on, it wasn't my land, but on the permission side that I had, he stacked up all the brush on my side, made these like just decent piles, and blocked them.
Yeah.
And so, and I didn't walk over that. You could see the trail that went up. And so obviously the deer came down at some point, saw that it was blocked. Well, the next time they just came down and they're like, oh, I can't go that way. And it diverted them off this way.
Yeah.
Completely different.
Yep.
You know, you don't think like when a trail splits, it just splits, but it splits and it just keeps splitting. And all of a sudden this little split takes a deer 30 or 40 yards the wrong direction.
Yeah.
So I'm like, come on, man. So I'm like, well, it's on my side. Yeah. So I pulled the brush all apart. I cleared the trail, and I really made it nice and easy. Oh, okay, guys, here you go.
Yeah.
And I cleared it all out. And that was like on a Sunday. And so I was like, well, I won't be able to get back in here till like next weekend again. And I was like, oh, I'll try it. I went back in there the next weekend, and I shot does there. They came right down that trail. They walked right through it, and boom, I killed them.
Yeah. It's funny. Even like just something as small as just like tying fences together.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it opens it up like that. That's what we did last year. My dad did that last year.
That's so true.
My dad did that last year, and like that night there was deer crossing.
Absolutely. The path of least resistance.
Yeah.
I'll tell you one more story, and I know we're getting really stuck on this, but I think it's cool. I think it's interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it's actually the buck I have in my office. The one in the corner.
Yeah.
I was 18, 19, 20. I don't know. It was a long time ago.
Yeah.
And I was hunting during late muzzleloader season in Iowa. And at that time I had a muzzleloader, and I was hunting late muzz season, and I was hunting near my hometown, and we had a lot of snow in December that year. And I was having a heck of a time because I was having to trudge all the way across this big field to get to this spot. And I mean, it was a lot of work. Well, I had a friend that had a snowmobile. So one of the days I was trudging out there, it was like in an early afternoon. I trudged all the way out there, didn't have any luck, trudged all the way back. And I'm like, you know what? This is silly. I'm like, the light bulb came on. I'm like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go get his snowmobile.
Yeah.
And I'm going to drive out here on the path that I want to walk down.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Beat it down a little bit.
Yeah. I'm just going to make it down, and then I don't have to like break through the snow.
Yeah.
It'll just, when you drive a snowmobile through, it'll just create a pack, and then you can just walk right across it. So I went to his house, and it was late at night, and I was like, I'm just going to go out there, whatever, I don't care. So I drove out there, and I just made a path to where I wanted to go, and then I just turned around and I just drove it back.
Yeah.
I went in there like a couple days later, and dude, there was deer walking on the snowmobile trail.
Oh, yeah.
And it was funny because I was just doing it for myself, and then I saw the deer tracks, and like it was like an epiphany. I'm like, well, that's interesting.
Yeah. Yep.
So I was like, I wonder what I could do with that. So now I'm like really got my hillbilly ingenuity going, right? The wheels are turning. I'm like, okay. So then I took a snowmobile out there again, and I was like, where do I want the deer to walk? So I literally drove through the field where I wanted the deer. I'm like, okay, they're going to walk down this edge. It'd be really cool if they cut right across here.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. I made little trails through the snow, and I didn't kill a deer, but I know that they used them.
Yeah.
And it was just a fact of, that was really, I think for me, one of the first times that I really saw the fact that a deer, they will look for the path of least resistance. That's where these LiDAR maps and finding the high spots on a marsh, or, you know what I mean, the contour can really become so valuable.
Yeah. Yep.
You know. So the other thing I wanted to talk about with the LiDAR maps is, I mentioned a little bit ago, is I'm going to try to get this right here. So like we talked about, the Iowa DNR has this great tool called the Iowa Hunting Atlas that you can see these LiDAR maps, but there's also other websites that you can use. One of them that's pretty legit. So this is the Iowa DNR. This is just of a spot, right? And, you know, in North Iowa, we have a lot of, it's just flat country.
Yeah.
But for a lot of other parts of the state of Iowa, especially, you're going to hunt a lot of contour. You're going to hunt a lot of, maybe bluff country, maybe deep ravines. This is a great example of a spot that I've hunted years and years ago that's more of in the bluff country, that's going to be more ravines, you know, off a river type deal.
Pretty aggressive type stuff.
Yes, yes. So what we're looking at here is, this is the Iowa Hunting Atlas LiDAR map, okay, of a great example of bluff country, deep cut ravines. This is the CalTopo map of the same thing. So the cool thing that I would tell you that you could do with this, and I'll go through this step by step so you can see it. So you can see that we're in the top right-hand corner, we're in the shade relief. That's what you would want to go to on the CalTopo. But the other interesting thing is this, what they call this slope angle shading, which is really kind of cool. The Iowa Hunting Atlas didn't give you this option, but you can see along the bottom, it tells you the percentage of grade that the ravine is, which I think is pretty incredible, because it can really shed some light on where you might think that deer may be bedded. Yeah. And they're probably not going to bed on like a 60-degree slope, 40-degree slope. So not only that, but you can also see there's a drop down here, and it's called gradient slope angle shading. So it gives you, it just, instead of it being black and white, it turns it to color. So this is a really, really incredible tool. Again, just another little thing that you can put in your arsenal. Yeah. And I think when we talk about these types of bluffs and or deep ravines, one of the things that I've always gone off of that's been a real, you know, I don't know where I learned it. I guess I just learned it. Well, I guess I kind of do know where I learned it. Years and years ago, I got to go to California, Northern California, and I got to go hunting for a Columbia blacktail. Yep. Which is it's almost like a mule deer, but it's just indigenous to like Northern California. They call it Columbia blacktail. In the summertime, I actually got to go hunting with a guy that I worked with. He was from there. And we went there in the summer, and we were hunting with our recurves, trying to spot and stalk and shoot these deer. Yep. Well, one of the things that I learned really quickly when I was with him is that, and I had seen deer do this before, but it was like, it just really hammered it home for me here, was we would glass up these bedded deer. Well, the interesting thing is we would glass them from a long ways away, and they would all be bedded up. And it was funny because Lane was like, yeah, so the wind is out of the west right there. And I'm like, what? And he's like, and I kind of knew what he meant, but he was like, they just lived and died by the fact that deer will bed with the wind at their back. Yeah. Yep. Right? They will bed with the wind at their back, and they will look in the upwind direction. You know what I'm, or excuse me, they'll look in the downwind direction. Yep. But they'll have the wind at their back, so their butt will face upwind, their head will be downwind, so they can smell what's coming over their back, but they can see what they can't smell. Yep. And so the interesting thing about that is that when we were hunting there, we were always looking at these deer, and you could see they were bedded, and that would help us decide how we were going to approach, which made it feel like it was impossible to kill them, because if you came from behind them, they were going to smell you, and if you came from in front of them, they were going to see you. Yeah. It was just ridiculous. So what we actually did is we tried to find deer that looked like they were sleeping. They were bedded down. Yeah. They had their head tucked. Yeah. You could just see their antlers barely, or you try to come in from the side of them, and try to get a broadside shot where they couldn't see you, couldn't smell you. It was really, really fun. I was fortunate that I harvested a deer. Yeah. I shot a deer with my recurve. It was cool. At like 15 yards, we spot and stalked, and it was cool. Well, anyway.
Well, and that's, sorry, I don't mean to.
No, you're good.
Keep going, but And that's why I feel like wind bumping, like when you're doing deer drives and stuff, is so successful, because think about it, like you're wind bumping, so you're walking towards where you think they're bedding.
Yep.
And then once they smell you, they just kind of get up and just kind of do their thing and go to their exit routes.
Yep.
Whereas if you're just running into them, they're just getting up and running all over. Well, they're bedding. They're not bedding just to bed. They know everything.
Yes.
They know exactly, okay, so if I bed here, I can smell what's behind me. If I smell something bad, I can kind of sneak down this way. And so when you do that wind bump, it's just a lot easier way to get them up and going real slow. Whereas if you're coming right at them, they're kind of getting up and you're really spooking them bad. But, with wind bumping, you can bump them from when if the wind's really going, you can bump them from way far away and they're just kind of getting up and doing their thing.
Yes,
it's a lot easier than just walking up on them and making them run like their head's cut off.
Absolutely.
So.
No, yeah, you're 100% right. Yeah. And I think the interesting thing when we look at this type of a map here is what you're describing when you're wind bumping, or where you're looking at the contour of this piece is, and what I was always taught is mature deer, and does will do this as well, is they will generally bed off of the high spot, off a point.
Yeah.
They'll bed off the highest point, off the high spot, just down.
Yeah.
And again, they'll bed with the upwind at their butt, looking downwind. So they can smell what's behind them, see what's in front of them.
Yep.
So the interesting thing is about this spot is when you just look at, and I'm going to go back to the Iowa DNR map, if you're basing all of your stuff off of aerial photos, well, tell me where the contour is. Where would you think a deer is going to be bedded there? Well, that is really hard to tell.
Yeah.
It's really hard to tell. Well, in a lot of Iowa, we've talked about this before. If you're seeing cornfields and you're seeing hardwoods, generally there's a reason there's hardwoods there.
Yeah.
It's not tillable. It's a deep ditch. It's a ravine. It's wet, whatever. That's why there's hardwoods there. But this is a great example where are the deer going to bed? On a west wind? Well, man, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of hard to tell. But you stick on this Lidar map, all of a sudden I go, well, guess what? On a west wind, meaning the wind's coming on the screen from the left to right, there's probably a good chance that like this point here, or this point here, this point here, this point here, you're going to see deer bedded off those points on a west wind.
Yep.
Because again, that means the wind's at their back. If it's a north wind, there's a good chance if it were me and I was going to be hunting the other day, I would go, okay, where's the wind out of? They're probably bedded off these points. Okay, on a north wind day, I would think a big mature deer is probably somewhere over here.
Yep.
Which can make it really hard to hunt because, geez, how do you do that? You come in from here, he smells you. You come in from here, he sees you. Okay, well, maybe I'm going to try to come in this way.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
So I think these Lidar maps, it's like, wow.
Yeah.
How huge can it be?
And then you can go to the gradient layer.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yep.
Because now you can go to the gradient and then take it a step further and say, okay, this spot right here is a little bit steeper than, say, this spot. So you're going to assume that they're probably going to be on the spot that's not as steep.
Exactly.
Just because it's easier for them to get down,
Yes, exactly. And I think the other thing that's interesting, this spot doesn't really give you an example of it.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of spots where then you can also use the gradients and the Lidar maps to not only just see the contour, and like you're saying here, look at this here. I mean, this is just, look at how uber steep some of this is.
Yeah.
That's just steep country.
Yep.
Deer probably not going to walk. They may walk up that, but they're probably going to find an easier spot.
Yeah.
So you could probably come along here and you could probably find an absolute dino trail that's coming up out of here somewhere because they're just not going to want that steep country. This can just fast forward that process. Yeah. The other thing that I would say is that these Lidar maps and the contour and the shade relief, the other thing it can really show you is you talk about looking for saddles and benches.
Yep.
When I say a saddle, just to clarify, what I mean by that is a saddle can mean two things. Like if you're just looking at a ridge line, okay? If there's just a ridge line, if there's a ridge line and then there's a dip and then the ridge continues, that's a saddle.
Yeah.
Think about it like sitting in a saddle, right? It's a low spot where those animals will walk through. Instead of walking up over the top, they find that saddle and they just walk through there.
Yeah.
So if you can use these Lidar maps to take away the trees and you can find a saddle, oh my gosh, that's right where I would look. Or a saddle can also mean that, say, like, I'm just trying to, like this right here, okay? See this right here? Imagine if this was a little bit bigger, but see how this bowls around right there? if there was all of a sudden a little spot that crossed over here, well, that can also be called a saddle, right? Because again, you just sit on it.
Yeah.
But the nice thing about that is it's saddles can also be ways it can kind of cut the corner of a ravine.
Yep.
Well, deer will walk through those saddles.
Yeah.
Or a ridge goes up and it flattens off. They'll sit in those benches.
Yep.
These LiDAR maps and these contour maps can really help you find the saddles, the benches, the pinch points where they might be bedding off of, where they're going to be moving through.
Yeah.
And or just give you a great place to start looking.
Yeah, well, and that's a great thing about this entire process. Like if there's like a really obvious saddle, you'll be able to see that on topo. But then you see that, okay, so I think that there's a bench right here. Then you go to this, and then it like really, kind of confirms it. So it's just this should just be part of your process of confirming everything that you're doing.
Well, and I think the thing that I think is going to be interesting for you and I this fall is we're kind of putting these scouting tactics into place for some of the spots that we're going to try to hunt in late October, November.
Yeah.
And the hard thing too is they're hours away.
Yeah.
So it's not easy to just jump in the truck and drive 20 minutes to my permission piece and like go put some boots on the ground and check it out like we have the last couple of days.
Yeah.
Some of these spots, or think about being a non-resident.
Yeah.
If you're from Pennsylvania and you drew Iowa and you aren't hunting with an outfit or you're trying to figure out where you can go, dude, these LiDAR maps,
huge.
It just unlocks so much information that can help you narrow down your search of going, okay, if I'm going to make a trip in mid-November or I'm going to make a trip in early October to scout and to get things ironed out and get some stand set, this can speed it. I mean, this can take days of tromping around out of the equation.
Yeah, definitely.
That's from my perspective.
Yeah.
Whether you're hunting in flat country like we're in, or you're hunting in bluff, deep ravine country, I think it can just really open up the perspective on where to start looking.
Yeah, definitely. Yep, without a doubt. And
the funny thing too is I hunted I've hunted this spot, for example, before LiDAR was a thing or I knew about it.
Yeah.
When I was in college, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I just knew from being out there that, okay, the trees means there's ravines. I knew it was bluff country. This has got to be, and there's got to be a flat spot in here.
Yep.
But now it's funny, look at this now and I'm like, well, that makes total sense.
Yeah, exactly.
It just really just reiterates what we were describing.
Yep, without a doubt.
Yeah. The other thing that I would say, and I think funny thing for you, what you mentioned earlier is when I started showing you LiDAR stuff, the first thing you did is you went straight to your Wisconsin piece and you're looking it all over and you're like dissecting it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great thing because I have as well done that to the spots that I have. I think sometimes, like we've talked about before, I know I am a creature of habit and I have the tendency to get stuck doing the same thing. I have to consciously be like, okay, come on, like think outside the box, do something different. And I think this LiDAR map has helped me look at my spot and go, you know what? Where are the overlooked spots on the piece that I'm hunting now?
Yep.
What am I missing?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe I'm focusing too much on the north end of this. I'm not hunting the south end of that enough. Why don't I hunt there?
Yeah.
Maybe I should. Wow, the contour, the LiDAR maps make that look like there would be deer walking down through there for sure.
Yeah.
Or coming up into this field from here.
Yeah.
And I've done that and now I've scouted those and I'm going to be setting stands in spots that I've just not before.
Yeah. I'm 100% in that same boat. Like cameras can only tell you so much and you think that you know your piece, but then like once I looked at that, I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know anything.
Yeah.
It just like you said, it unlocks a ton of data that can be very useful.
Well, and to kind of pound that point home, this is an example of another spot that I've hunted in the past that I hunted before LiDAR. I was aware of it. And it's funny, then I started looking at LiDAR because the funny thing is I was hunting this little corner, corner of this field. And the deer, for whatever reason, I kept seeing them come from the north across this top down into this. And I understood that they came through the deep cut ravine, but they were coming from the north. I'm like, why are you guys coming from there? That just doesn't make any sense to me. Like, there's not really much over there. I'm looking at it on the Google Images. I'm like, why are they doing that?
Yeah.
Funny thing about that. So this is the spot. Okay. Perfect example. So if you can see from the mouse, this is the corner that I hunted. Okay. Right down in here. Okay. And this is a deep cut ravine, little creek that runs down through here. this is all incredible bedding area. So I could sneak in there a couple different ways and I would hunt this corner. Well, all of a sudden, deer were coming from the north, and they were walking right through here, coming across the field and just kind of walking along this edge. And that's where they would kind of to and from,
Yep.
as well as this bedding area kind of right over this direction. I was like, what the heck is going on? Well, watch this. Boom. Okay, let's click back out of it. Okay, I'm gonna put my finger on where my spot was. Okay, so there I am, right on this corner, the deep ravine behind me, and I wonder why the deer were walking through here. Look at the high spot. There's the high spot right all through there. I mean, heck, that's just where it had been bulldozed out, but you can even see that that's just a little deeper. But that's what's funny is it's not a coincidence that the deer walked through there. That was where the high spot was.
Yep.
You know, that was a path of least resistance. And obviously, this was the other high spot. When I looked at it, when I hunted it, I mean, I knew this was high because I could see it, but I didn't realize that even that high spot ran as far out as it did.
Yeah.
You know, like, look at this grove over here. Man, you want to talk about a dino spot. I wish I could get a stand right over here. Could you imagine?
Oh, yeah.
Right on the top of that ridge, what that over here could look like?
Oh, man.
Give me a break.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just really interesting when you flip between those lidars, what it can really all of a sudden start to tell you information that you might just not have realized before.
Yeah.
It just really can shed some light on, I don't know, just on a whole different perspective,
Yes.
on a way to break down your spots and to try to think, you know, and just be open-minded about what are these maps telling me?
Yeah, without a doubt.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
When you look at both of these spots that we scouted this week, the one thing that you had said earlier that I think is so true to this is these spots both fit the idea. Go ahead and say what it is.
Having food, cover, and water.
Yeah. Food, cover, and water. Both of these spots have that.
Yeah.
The first spot, the thickets, the cover.
Yep.
The cornfields.
The massive marsh and the massive cornfield.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, they got everything just to hunker down right there.
Yeah.
You know?
And then the second spot, same thing.
Same exact thing.
Yeah, you've got the creek right behind, so you obviously know where they're getting water.
Yep.
There's small little seeps as well if they don't want to get jerk on running water. They want more still water. There's still water there too. You got the huge thicket.
Yeah.
You've got the cornfield, and then there's another big thicket.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it just makes total sense.
Yeah, and we kind of talked about that too in an earlier podcast about, you don't need thousands of acres to hold deer.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if they have those three things, that's all they need. You know, it does not need to be a giant piece.
Yeah. Food, cover, water.
Yeah, that's the big three.
Yep. No, and it makes total sense. And like you said, it was an interesting process to kind of go through. Like you said, when you go from looking at the Google images to jump, really diving into the Lidar maps,
Yep.
to really kind of thinking about that food, cover, water, and then actually getting out there and putting the drone in the air and getting boots on the ground and actually seeing the rubs, seeing the trails.
Yeah.
That's where I put a tree stand.
Yep.
And to just kind of feel like it all kind of comes together.
Yeah, it's a very satisfying process to go from, okay, looking at Google Maps, maybe a topo, then LiDAR, and then, okay, yep, this looks good enough to go out there. Let's throw the drone up, and then let's walk out there. And then when it all makes sense, it's like, man, it's a pretty cool feeling, especially in May. Just gets you in that mindset, man.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. And that's the thing too, is like you said, it's early.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think the other thing that to discuss is, how do you find those spots? How do you find those overlooked spots? I think that's that's the kind of the $1 million question.
Yeah.
And honestly, I don't know if there's a right and wrong answer or right and wrong response to that. Mm-hmm. I mean, sometimes I think, I've always really believed in the old adage, the harder you work, the luckier you get.
Yep.
And so, for me, I think it's a combination of, I think what I've really tried to grab a hold of the last few years is to try to be more open-minded.
Yep.
Not only just during deer season, but all year round.
Yeah.
During turkey season, hey, I'm seeing deer there. Oh, that's interesting. Even this spring on the permission piece that we have or that I have that I do a lot of turkey hunting on. I call it the river spot. And I sit down by this river, but I look off to the south, and all of a sudden I was like, man, there's a lot of deer working along that tree line.
Yeah.
And they've done that for years, but there's a road, he calls it a combine road, that goes down to that field. And I said, I'm like, you know what? I think I'm going to set a stand off that combine road.
Yeah.
Like, they walk right along that tree line.
Yeah.
They walk there all fall too. Why didn't I ever think of that? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, and again, I really think initially, just really think about your existing spots and the overlooked spots. And again, sometimes the other thing caveat I would say is the spots that we looked at this week, you know, it's great if you can try to find an overlooked spot in like a big, huge tract of hardwoods.
Yeah.
That can be great for like an all day sit and you just know that there may be deer passing through there. Some of these spots, the trick of it is it can be very feast or famine.
Yeah.
The other thing that I would say is what I think the other thing that we didn't mention that I think we're going to do to both of these spots. And again, in this day and age with cell cams, we have done our due diligence. We've done our homework. We've spent the time. We know where it is. We're going to put stands. But then the other thing that we're going to do is we're going to put cams in there.
Yep.
And I think we'll probably, on these kind of smaller overlooked spots, I think the trick is it's not about spending quantity of time out there. It's about spending the quality time out there. So my point is that like on the spot on that marsh, if we put a camera in there, I don't think that you go and sit it like March 1st and just hunt it like boom, ba boom, ba boom, ba boom, ba boom, ba boom.
Yeah.
I think you put a camera in there, and when you start to get deer in front of the camera,
Then go in there.
okay, not that the deer can't be there and they're not walking, they couldn't maybe not walk by the cameras, because that happens all the time.
Yeah.
You know, we've joked about that before, that sometimes cell cams save more deer's lives than kill them. But I think that that's a great indicator that we've done the homework, we've put the stands in, but then let's concentrate on spending quality time rather than the quantity of time. Let's put a cell cam in there. And then when the cell cam starts to light up, okay, let's move in. I do that during turkey season.
Yeah.
I mean, as much as you can scout turkeys, if there's not turkeys there and they're not walking by the field, like I'm not going to spend time there. All of a sudden, there's a tom there, I move in.
Yeah.
And I'll do that in the fall. I'll put my cams out, and it's great to get deer on camera in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
But I can only hunt sun up to sundown, right?
Yeah.
So when all of a sudden I get deer on the hoof during the day, that's when I'll move in. And that's what I think you can do with these small spots, is just really try to, if you're going to try to concentrate and be like, okay, this is my spot all year long, you're probably going to spend a lot of time out there.
Yeah.
And maybe not see anything. And that's still okay too. That's really fun. I mean, I've done that a lot too, where I've just been out in the woods and not seen anything.
Yeah.
But that's the nice thing about this day and age with cell cams, is you can use them to help capitalize and get out there at the right time.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think another thing to think about too is like, you don't know if you don't go. So like if you find like a public piece and you're kind of like second guessing it and, you're not too sure on about it, well, odds are there's probably 20 other dudes that are having that same exact mindset.
Yeah.
So like, if I were to give any advice, it'd be like, just go out there and look and see, because that's where you could find that overlooked spot. Because like I said, there's probably a lot of people thinking the same thing. Like, oh, this doesn't look like anything. Well, it could be a diamond in the rough,
Yeah.
It's so crucial just to get out there and see for yourself and, confirm,
Yeah. And I think the other thing that I would say when it comes to overlooked spots is I think the insanely overlooked spot all across the state of Iowa, and I think in a lot of places, even in Wisconsin, I know there's a lot of bow hunters everywhere now. You know what I mean? Whether it's Wisconsin or Iowa or Illinois or Michigan or wherever, there's a lot of bow hunters. But man, I would say if you held a gun to my head and said, where should I start looking for an overlooked spot? I would look to public land.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Because I just think
without a doubt.
it's just like, I mean, I have friends that work for the DNR, and they work on pieces, and they're like, yeah, we've been out there all fall and there hasn't been a single car in the driveway.
Yep.
Like there hasn't been a single truck out there.
Yep.
Like I've done that numerous times where I've hunted places and I run into guys out there like, you're the first person I've seen.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just wild, because not like Iowa is the size of Alaska.
No.
And, per square mile, it's not like Iowa has this huge percentage of public land. But if you want to look for a spot to look, that's it. And that's the other thing I would say. I mean, it sounds crazy, but there as flat as Iowa is, and as just nothing but ag that it is, if you go onto that Lidar map and you zoom out to the whole state of Iowa, you are going to see a lot of river systems.
Oh yeah, it's
a
insane.
lot of river systems.
Yeah, we were looking at that the other day. It's unreal.
A lot more than you think.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, you just think that it's just like nothingness, and but there's a lot more river systems. There's three really big river systems right off the back. You got the Missouri River on the one end, you got the Des Moines River in the middle, and you got the Mississippi River on the other end.
Yeah.
So if you're looking for a spot to go, last time I checked, the entire eastern side of Iowa, the Mississippi River, the Mississippi River Delta, whatever they call it, the floodplain, that's all that's all Army Corps of Engineer land.
Yeah.
That's all state or federal, you know what I mean? Like, it's all public access.
Yeah.
Granted, a lot of it gets pretty wet, but there's a lot of it that's not wet.
Yeah.
You're looking for a spot to go. You talk about hunting like the islands of the Mississippi.
Yeah.
There's those all across the state of Iowa, all the way down the state of Iowa as well.
Yeah.
You can do that on the Des Moines River. The Des Moines River also is Army Corps of Engineers.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
I don't know this for a fact, but I'm sure the Missouri River on the west side is the same thing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of floodplain.
Yep.
So if you're looking for a place to start, and that's the nice thing if you hunt the Mississippi, and if you're from east, you're not having to drive as far.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
You're not having to go to the middle of the state or whatever. It could save you a couple hours of driving.
Yeah.
So that would be another place I would say that I think there's probably, it'd be awesome if somebody's listening going, gosh, I wish you wouldn't have said that. Because I just think, I've hunted like Dubuque and south of Dubuque and down towards southeast Iowa, and there is a lot of country that's just public hunting off the Mississippi River.
Yep.
Yeah, I would check that out as well.
Oh, I mean, yeah. I mean, it's funny. There's a certain spot that I'm not going to disclose any information on, but I was like, I totally overlooked it hardcore. And all of a sudden Cole's like, there's a place that you should hunt and you should go there. And he pulled it up on a map. I'm like, I was literally looking at that last time. I'm like, there's no way I'm going in there.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Tell me which spot without telling me which spot. Or beat. You could
the
say
8-pointer you shot.
Oh, yeah.
I overlooked that so hard.
Yeah, you did. That is so funny.
I overlooked that so hard. I was like,
so funny.
I pull it up and I'm like, nah, there's no way there's anything in there. All of a sudden Cole's like, oh, you should go to this spot. It's super, super good. And I killed this buck there. I killed that buck there. I had pictures of this buck there. I'm like, wow, I feel like an idiot.
And the funny thing is, that's actually a really good story to tell because, I can't believe we didn't even think about that.
I know.
Because, so then you actually went in there and scouted it.
And it was insane.
Yeah. You called me like freaking out. You're like, I just walked 4.59 miles and there's sign everywhere.
It was bad. It was like my first time in Iowa scouting for something for myself. Not even for myself, but like knowing like, okay, there's a chance that I could be hunting. Like, I scouted places last year, but I knew I was just filming. But now I'm like, ooh, there's a chance that I could be hunting out here. And I like start walking through there. I'm like, oh my God, I was freaking out. It was sweet.
Yeah. And that is a spot that gets way overlooked.
Oh, it's insane. And then the other day I drove by it and I counted 24 deer on public.
Just standing there.
Side of the road.
Just gawking around.
Yep.
I know. It's funny, man. I'm telling you.
Man, I really wish we could tell you guys where this is, but
yeah. If you want to send a check to Cole or Nick, no, I'm just kidding. Yeah. No, but that's the thing. I mean, and I guess the thing that I would say is like, I think the moral of the story to that is that there are pieces like that, like this undisclosed location that we're talking about.
Yeah.
All over. They're to the south, to the north, to the east, to the west.
Yeah.
Again, going back to that Iowa hunting atlas, you can go on there and if you look at the whole state, you can pull that up.
Yeah.
It shows you, it pings all the public locations.
Yeah.
You get on Onyx.
Same thing.
Onyx does the same thing. The other thing that I would say that's an interesting thing to do, and I personally haven't done this. I've thought about doing it, and I probably just should. You can call your local conservation office.
Oh yeah,
talk to your local biologist, but not only that, just to talk and just to have conversation with them. I know the guys around here are bow hunters.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I end up, in a couple conversations every year, just chatting about different stuff,
Yeah.
just because I think it's interesting. And, I like to in some way be involved, right?
Yeah.
But the thing that I would say, not only just to chat with them, but ask them, hey, are there any pieces that are coming up public that aren't marked yet?
Yep.
That you guys don't have signed up yet?
Yep.
Signed up meaning they don't have signs saying this is a corner of the public private.
Yep.
This is public, and the other side of the sign said this is private land. Do you guys have any of those spots yet? There's also spots all across the state, across the country called Nature Conservancy.
Yep.
Nature Conservancy is a big organization that buys pieces of private land with the idea of them to never be developed.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And Nature Conservancy works with the state of Iowa and biologists to manage those pieces as well.
Yep.
And some of those they're like all, I don't know the exact verbiage, and I'm sorry if I'm saying this completely wrong, but they're pieces of private ground that are open to the public.
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool,
Yeah.
So it's like, it's public, it's not public land, but it's open to the public.
Yeah.
Some of it's allowed to be hunting, some of it's not. Bop.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying is if you're looking at Onyx maps, if you're on the Iowa DNR website and you look at the hunting atlas, you could take it a step further and you can call these guys.
Yeah.
Call these men and women, have conversations with them and see what they might be able to tell you.
Yep.
Because those engineers are out there all the time working on spots, getting spots prepared, and then they just don't get them signed.
Yeah.
They don't get the signs up yet, but they're technically there to be hunted.
Yeah. We hunted a spot last year actually pretty regularly. It was probably one of our better spots. It was signed, but it wasn't on Onyx.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it was like really new. And so, yeah, it just was kind of like a little secret spot kind of.
Yeah.
And it was like in the middle of nowhere. So not like you would have to drive by it to see it. And it was pretty big. We had a couple pictures of guys on there, a lot of pheasant hunters, but yeah, it was kind of that same deal. It didn't show up on Onyx's public, but there was public signs there. So
I'll tell you the other thing that I would say for overlooked spots, a good place to start is, and I don't know if there's a way that you could, this would actually be a funny thing. Somebody should come up with this. They should make a map, a level B map of the state of Iowa.
I love level B roads.
If you don't, so not everybody knows what a level B road is. I don't know if they have them in every state.
They don't in Wisconsin.
Okay. So level B roads in the state of Iowa are roads that don't have a house that's on that road.
Yeah.
And so the state or the county, they're like, well, why should we maintain that road? There's no house.
There's no reason to.
There's no reason to. So they just leave it.
Yeah.
And a lot of times of the year you can drive down them because they're dry enough.
Yep.
Or they're dry enough, or they're hard enough or cold enough. But then there's other times of the year
they get bad.
They get to be a rodeo. in the springtime, in the summertime,
Yep.
They are like every high school kid's dream.
Yep.
Because if you want to go mudding, that's the place to do it, because it's like they can be really western.
Yeah.
And in the wintertime, the snow can get unbearable.
Yeah.
Because they don't plow it out.
No.
But again, so that's what a level B road is. They just a sign that says level B, low maintenance or low maintained or whatever.
Yeah.
And so when I was a kid, we had a couple level B roads and we all knew where they were. And, we went out there and did stupid stuff because we were just kids. But the other thing about level B roads is because there's not a house on that section, or on that road, there's a lot of times there's really good hunting opportunities off level B roads.
Yeah.
Great place to start doing some velvet scouting is on level B roads.
Yep. That's like all we did last year. We actually call ourselves the Level B Boys. we would literally drive around and just find level B roads and just drive down them. And then once we got off it, we would just take the next level B road that we found, and it was awesome. We had this one route that was like, it went way far, but it was just level B roads that were kind of connected, and it was just beautiful. And we always saw big deer. It was so much fun.
Yeah, and it's funny because North Iowa level B roads are usually just kind of flat. Sometimes there's a few curves, but Southern Iowa level B roads are like straight up, straight down, straight up, straight down.
There was a couple that we looked over at each other and were like, are we actually supposed to be here? Because you would go, and then all of a sudden you turn right into like a ridge.
Yes.
And you're just driving up the ridge, like in the middle of the woods. And you're like,
yes,
what is going on here? And then it turns off, and then, all of a sudden you're back up on a normal road. But it's really cool. It was a heck of a lot of fun.
Yeah. Dude, it's funny you say that. So So there's this thing, this is way off subject, but on subject. There's this thing called the Boonville Ultra Marathon. They do a 50-mile race and a 100-mile race. It's in Boonville, Boonville is just the worst name for a town.
Yeah.
Whenever I see that on the interstate, I always imagine that there was like some settlers that were like, they were from Boone. You're like, we were from Boone, but you know what? We didn't like Tommy. He was a terrible mayor, so we're sticking it to him. We're creating Boonville. You know what I mean? Yeah, Boone. It seems like a bad name too.
Yeah.
Sorry if you're from Boone. I love Boone. I love going to Speedway. I've spent time in Boone, but Boonville just seems like that just needs to be a new name. I don't know.
Yeah.
But they have this Boonville Ultra Marathon. And it's funny because you wouldn't think that you could, you think of Iowa, you think of flat. You wouldn't think that you could, find all this elevation, climb and descent.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And one thing that's kind of their claim to fame is that it's insane the elevation gain and drop during this 100-mile race. Well, part of what they do is I don't know the guy. I've watched his YouTube videos and been on their site and listened to things about it, but like, it sounds like it's really, really hard. I would love to do a 100-mile race someday. But the funny thing is they go on level B roads.
That's awesome.
And I looked at the route and it goes like down south of Boonville and then like down by Winterset and down all through there and then comes back and it gets on some level B roads and they look Western.
Oh my gosh.
And this is in early September. So it's like, if they get like those Labor Day rains, it just turns into a mess.
Yeah. It got pretty Western a couple times with us.
Yeah.
There's like that road that went up that ridge. I mean, it was bad. It was really bad. And then there was another one where we were coming down a steep hill and it had rained like 2 days before and we were like, oh, it'll be fine. It was fine until we got like way back in there and then it got real soupy and we're like, oh my God, if something goes wrong here, like we're screwed.
You don't have a winch.
Yeah, there's nothing. No service, nothing.
Not only that, but like it's not as bad if you're the first guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the second guy.
Yeah.
Because you had the chance to, you kind of like had a little bit of traction on top.
Yeah.
You made the rut. Yeah. But once you made the rut, then it gets real bad.
And thank God we were in the heavy Chevy because we just cruised right through it.
The heavy Chevy. We have a little bit of a personal vendetta here because, Nick drives a heavy Chevy. I like to call it the rust bucket.
Just adds character, man.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, though. So I drive a Ford F-150. Honestly, though, I could care less. I just think it's funny. But my truck is starting to get a couple rust spots now all of a sudden, too.
Yeah.
But it's just character.
Yeah, that's what happens when you use it as much as we do.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't drive no pavement princesses.
No, we do not.
These things are workhorses.
Yeah, they are. You know, it's funny you say that. When I used to work out in Colorado, a buddy that I worked with, his name is Luke, and he drove this old Toyota. And it was old when I was guiding with him, but then it's got really old. I think he still has it, or maybe he finally got rid of it. But anyway, one time I was with him and he was talking about his truck, and we were just chatting along, and he made a comment. He's like, my truck's a tool, man. And I was like, yeah, you're right. And he goes, it is. He's like, it's a tool. Like I use it like a tool. Like I use my truck.
Yeah.
And I think that's so perfect because that's what I do.
Yeah.
I mean, I use my truck and I try to keep it clean. And there's a Tommy's Express car wash that I frequent. You know what I mean? Like I go to like twice a day. It's right on the way to and from work. That's my excuse. But still, my truck takes a beating because it's a tool. Like I use it. I think it's awesome to put like just this week I was working on my landscaping, got all the old mulch out and filling out the back of the truck and putting tree stands in there. And I'd love to put dead deer in the back of my truck.
That's what they're made for.
All right. Well, I think we're good.
Yeah.
I think so too. I think we covered a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, like you said, just don't overlook those overlooked spots.
Yeah.
Yeah. Spend some time, whether it's with the Google images on the Iowa DNR site, looking at their hunting atlas, check out those Lidar maps. I think that's just an invaluable tool. And then again, you just can't beat putting boots on the ground.
Nope. Best way to do it.
Yep. All right, guys. Well, Ozonics Killerwind podcast, episode number 8 in the books. Thanks for watching. I'm Cole Tanner.
I'm Nick Simon.
Good luck out there. Boom, 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 boom.